So would it be too easy to describe this film as Mad Max meets Roadhouse? Hello and welcome to Sci-Fi-Night. I'm your host, Sebastian Bendel Martinez, and this is the show where we check out some of the lesser-known sci-fi and horror movies out there and let you know what to expect from them. So, in tonight's episode, we're checking out a movie starring Patrick Swayze where he bands together with a group of rebels to fight an invading power. But here's the kicker, it's not the Russians. Steel Dawn, yep, that's right, Steel Dawn, not Red Dawn, is a 1987 sci-fi adventure directed by Lance Hool, who hasn't really directed anything else. It's also confusing / coincidental that Patrick Swayze has starred in 2 films with such similar titles.
You like being mysterious, don't you? But I know a little bit more about you than you think I do.
The movie of course stars Mr. Dirty Dancing himself, Patrick Swayze, rest in peace, as well as, well, to be honest, no one really famous, but you might recognize Brian James from Blade Runner or The Fifth Element, as well as Arnold Vosloo, who played Imhotep in the Stephen Sommers' The Mummy series. The film takes place in a post-apocalyptic future where we follow an unnamed nomad played by Swayze who wanders through the wasteland, coming into contact with all kinds of characters and creatures. Eventually a friend of his is killed, and I think we all kind of know the typical quest for revenge and honor that's about to follow. One day while out wandering, he discovers a settlement of well-meaning farmers and colonists, and being a good guy Patrick Swayze that he is, he decides to stay and help them with the problems they've been having with their water supply. During the process, he even starts forming a fatherly relationship with one of the boys in the settlement.
Those won't grow.
Why not?
You planted them upside down.
As well as a not-so-fatherly or platonic relationship with the boy's mother.
Are you sure? It's gonna be all right?
And then they all lived happily together for the rest of their... No, fucking of course not. Shit's about to kick off in just the way you'd expect in a post-apocalyptic movie. Before we know it, this peaceful way of life comes to a halt when the local bad guy Damnil, yeah, that's his real name, decides that he wants the settlement's water for himself.
Work with me, nobody gets hurt. Turn me down. A lot of people get hurt.
Why? Well, obviously because he's the bad guy.
I am the authority in this valley.
And fun fact is that Anthony Zerbe played a part in the film Star Trek Insurrection.
We're taking this ship out of here. This mission is over.
It is not over.
It is over.
Alright, so I should probably just go out there and say it. This is not a good movie. It's silly, it's stupid, and yet I just find it so charming and fun that I can't help but smile while watching it. This film is very black and white. The heroes are super clear-cut good guys, and the bad guys are all evil. And Patrick Swayze is just as cliche as he was in, well, almost everything else he's been in.
What do you think I am?
He's a troubled hero that's just too pretty to be taken seriously as a badass. With that said though, he does have a very cool sword, and the fight choreography is actually pretty okay. The movie just has an overall nice 80s charm to it as well, with some surprisingly nice effects, map paintings, and visuals. Sure, the $3 million budget shows, and this obviously won't look as good as Mad Max Fury Road, but in a weird way, the low budget just kind of adds to the already nice and cozy charm that this flick has. There are some interesting visual designs and some cool vehicles, and while a little bit cheap, most of the sets and costumes look fine. So yeah, this is basically a movie about a lone badass roaming the desert, protecting a settlement from a tyrant who wants her resources and... Wait a minute, is this a Western? Yeah, you know, aside from Swayze looking and acting like he's doing his third best Clint Eastwood impression...
You used to be faster.
You used to have more hair. Spare some water. I'll pay.
There's an awful lot of Western vibes that come off in this film. The story is very simple and straightforward, which I don't mind, and the action is perfectly serviceable at least. It's kind of like a Road Warrior meets Tombstone, but not all as cool as that sounds, as this is still a very cheesy film, and it is a clear-cut B-movie.
Let's cut off his balls and slit open his gut.
That doesn't mean it's not enjoyable though, it all depends on how you approach it.
You might as well know the layout from the start.
So, how should you approach this film? Well, let's start with what you should expect. Expect to go crazy for Swayze. Alright, so to be fair, Swayze doesn't really seem to be bringing his A game for this.
There are more important things to do today.
He's more or less playing the same role he has in several films, and you could just as easily look at this as a much dirtier version of Roadhouse. But hey, what he does definitely works for this film. But if you're tired of the same performance you saw in Red Dawn, then this won't exactly be a breath of fresh air. However, if you're a crazy Swayze fan, then you'll dig this.
Taught me enough not to argue with you.
An apocalypse with extra cheese. There's no getting around the fact that this is a very cheesy B-film that, in all fairness, deserves every bit of cult status that it has because of its cheapness and B-movie quality is also what makes it charming. There's tons of flaws in it, but the setting actually lets the filmmakers get away with quite a bit, as everything is supposed to be really shitty looking in the post-apocalypse. If you don't mind something that's very rough and greasy around the edges, while getting glamored by that old school feel, then here's something to curl up to.
Seems I arrived just in time for a speech.
Good potential. I can talk about the coziness of a shoddy production all I want, but this isn't a good film per se. Which is unfortunate because this could have been a genuinely good flick without having to excuse the film at every turn. There's a very clear creative potential here that isn't really explored, and the world itself is actually pretty interesting. For example, what are those weird underground sand raider things? They're super cool, but they only show up once. It's a shame a lot of the execution just comes off as kind of crummy and silly. I can appreciate a film that doesn't take itself too seriously, but I wouldn't have minded a little bit more tension to some parts. Had this film had a better budget and maybe a more experienced director, then this could have been a genuinely good film instead of just good for a B-movie. So I'd say this is actually a prime candidate for a remake. A remake that'll probably never happen.
Think about it. Don't think too long.
Alright, so a lot of people online are saying that there's basically two reasons to watch this film. One, if you're a Patrick Swayze fan, and two, if you're a post-apocalyptic fan. And I can't really disagree with that. If you're a Swayze fan, then chances are you've probably already seen this, and if you just like the post-apocalyptic stuff, then I definitely recommend this. It seems that this movie gets a lot of hate, but I think that is mostly just because of Swayze. If you like post-apocalyptic films like The Road Warrior, The New Gladiators, or Warlords of the 21st Century, then this will probably be your jam. But to be honest, this is just too flawed and silly to be taken seriously, which will take a lot of people out of the experience.
There's not much more I can do for you.
Maybe some of the creative potential will be enough to get you into it, but it kind of depends on how much of a post-apocalyptic nerd you are, and well, I'm a big one.
You know something? You're not so disgusting.
Alright, so that about does it for this episode of Sci-Fi-Night. We hope you enjoyed it. As always, you should let us know what you thought of this episode, the movie Steel Dawn, and give us some suggestions for future content in the comments below. So, as always, I'm your host, Sebastian Vendel Martinez, and we'll catch you guys next time.
far away is Dan Mills Farm?
I don't know. 5 miles, maybe 5.5.
You interested in a little exercise tonight?
Yeah.